had to give up dyeing or chocolate, I think chocolate would lose. So, and if something at home is not able to run away, it might get dyed. And it turned out that there was a class, and Jane Townsend was teaching it. And I was already into hand applique at that point. And I was like, oh, you know, my one chance, and it's nationally known teachers right here. And they're like, well, she teaches every month. So I was like, okay. And I signed up for those classes. And she used her student work in her quilts, but this was one that I made. And now looking at it, I can see the flaws. I loved it at the time. And it's still proud of it. Barbara Persing did the quilting on it. Everybody take a picture that was gonna. The back of it was fabric that I decided needed to be dyed. Not what we're covering today, sorry. But this has a lot more hand dyes in it. There's shibori on the border. This is actually a very pale violet lavender, and the yellow's hand dyed. And there's this one's worth touching. Velvet for the flower center and for the little hand-dyed velvet. Yeah, it dyes gorgeous. It's actually rayon is the pile, so it's good. It sucks up the dye, and it also reflects the light brilliantly. And I didn't have time. Oh, and then there's some felted wool that I dyed too, because more velvet. So you got to touch this one. I ran out of time. She used her student work as illustration for her books. And if you go on Amazon and look at the chapter headings, that's my blog on Amazon. So I just said, well, they're really nice designs. So I did the red work in purple for the two center blocks, just because I wasn't going to get all those little turned bits done in time to finish the quilt. There was a challenge put out, and it was one of those, pick one of those silly holidays, like National Pickle Day or Walk Your Dog Day, or it was Cat Day the other day. Somebody on Facebook posted greetings. And I said, well, my birthday's in September, our anniversary, my sister's birthday, I'll do something in September. And I found Elephant Appreciation Day. I was like, okay. And so I had a picture I'd taken at the Columbus Zoo, just an elephant hanging out, not being terribly happy, but worked with that and came up with a full-scale drawing of it. And then this was the result. And everything that you're seeing except the eye is something I dyed. The eyes I'm also made by me out of polymer clay. The tusks are polycarbonate plastic, and they've actually been dyed. They dye like polyester. It's polycarbonate, polyester. Dye's not fussy. By soaking a piece of cheesecloth in the dye, letting it dry, and then keep transferring it onto the plastic. And you can sort of, as opposed to the back is smooth, that's actually texture from the cheesecloth. It got embedded, the plastic, the polyester, polycarbonate softened up a little. Sorry, yeah, we'll hang it back out. And then the gray of the elephant is a polyester Georgette, I think. My mom was the one with knew all the names for every fabric out there. But I did a shibori pipe wrapping thing. You take in this case, make a sleeve of fabric, just a little straight stitch basting length. So because you're going to rip it out, make a tube out of it, smush it down. It's kind of like putting, remember when we wear stockings? You have to smush them up. So the whole thing got crumpled up onto this pipe and put it into an autoclave because you need heat and pressure to dye polyesters. So hubby took me to a tattoo parlor for my birthday, and somebody was selling an autoclave on Craigslist. It was $50, and I was like, score! And it's really, a pressure canner is the same thing. It goes up to 20 pounds of pressure. I made the whole thing crinkly wrinkly. It's not even stitched down all over. It's just tacked in places. Can't quite see it, but that's the quilting is really what's largely holding it down. And then I'd taken some of it and flattened it back out so this is just hand gathered, and then I let it go completely flat. And if you get a chance to look at it closely, there are these fine little lines in the flat area. And it was when the fabric has to dry, the dye migrates as the fabric dries. I said all the words in the right order. And as it creeps, it's separated. So there's, gray, there's a little brown, there's some charcoal, there's hints of blue, and that's the colors that went into making up the black dye. And I was like, wow. I just thought this was so cool. So, just a little proud as well. So, he was a lot of fun, and traveled around with the Celebrate the Day book. It was one of the touring exhibits that they have at the quilt shows. So he was missing for a couple of years and not lost or anything, he was traveling. And came home, so now he lives in my office in the dining room. I don't have the ribbon on the back, but it got an award down at, I forget where. But same design. I think it's turned slightly. And, gee, spare thread, imagine that. This was the class that I taught that Patricia and Joanna, Christina, they're close. I'm so sorry. Hey you, yep. So.
That was a fabulous class.
Yeah, that was just taking the, what happens when you take two colors and they intersect. So, and then the quilting was done by a lady that I know from Virginia. And we may as well just turn it over, yeah. And she just did an awesome job. The judges knocked points off, interestingly enough, because it's absolutely stellar quilting, but in their mind it wasn't the spare kind of quilting that you would see with a typically modern quilt. I have to agree, it's kind of, if I was getting my art history hat back on, it would be kind of rococo. And I've taken them up at Pro Chemical and Dye in Fall River, Massachusetts. They have really good teachers. And I've also gone out to Nancy Crow's barn in Baltimore, Ohio, which is outside Columbus. And their spring classes coincide with Quilt National and, the Surface Design Conferences there too. This is all exciting, but I've had a lot of people interested in solids, so I brought some of them along. And solids are a little different from regular low water immersion, which is what people think of when they think of hand dyes, like that. You've got all the different colors and kind of crackly texture. To get solids, you need to stir and stir and stir and stir. And so I do them in a washing machine. I have 2 wringer washers now. But I have friends with 7, so I have not quite reached the level of total fanatic. You know, I can only run. I've run my wringer and my tabletop washer. It's like a 4-gallon bucket. And I'm like, okay, what step am I on which machine? I could not imagine running 7 wringer washers. But if you're doing it, also makes sense when you're used to it, because if you need an array of values of the same color, you mix up, a gallon and a half of dye. You put 3/4 of it into the first washer, and then you put half as much in the next, and half as much, and half as much, and you'll get a range. I think these are all the same color. I think these are Kona, so I do.
When you say Kona, is that the name of the color?
Kona is that, like the sample card that was in the.
Okay, it's their fabric.
It's their, but I buy the PFD version of Kona.
Prepared for dyeing.
Right. So I can get Kona and Chemotex, and Rachel, I found out Radiance is back. Yay!
What is Radiance?
Radiance is half cotton and half silk. Yeah. I don't have anything white here. The other thing that I do that I was like the first kind of high-end class that I took was, did anybody watch Alex Anderson when she had the lady spraying bleach? If you've seen it, you'll remember it, because this lady took leaf shapes, laid them on black fabric, sprayed bleach over them, and she took the same shape and did a fusible applique and staggered it just a little bit. So she had these gorgeous echoed shadows. It looked like the applique colored fabrics were floating over the shadow that was provided from the bleach, making the background fabric look orange, which is what usually happens with black. That's a class that's a whole lot of fun. Absolutely has to be outdoors, and you have to wear masks, like there are fake masks. But there are other, you can't use bleach on silk. This is a piece of black Radiance. This is the cotton side. Hey, I found the microphone again. And that's the silk side. It was black when I bought it. I took the color out, and then I put the hot pink in. And it even changed, the color changes from the silk side to the cotton side, but another one that you have to feel. So, yes.
Can you take the color out with bleach?
Not with silk. Bleach works on cotton fabric, and then you need to neutralize it too, because it can keep degrading the fabric. There's some people that are like, oh, I did this 20 years ago and it's fine. I'm like, a jar is $2. Why would you not neutralize the bleach? And it's a product called Thiox or thiourea dioxide. There won't be a quiz. But they actually work differently. Bleach attacks the fiber and basically strips off the dye. And Thiox only goes after the dye molecule, which is like, who knew? Just amazes me. This was folded lengthwise. It was probably 3 yards when it started, so it was fan folded like that. And then I hand stitched, because Radiance is a sateen weave and it needles beautifully. So I hand stitched the whole thing and ended up with a piece this wide and all scrunched up like this before it went into the dye bath. And that's where these patterns come from. It kind of looks like a cardiogram or something. Yeah, so you can do the same thing with white fabric. Okay. This is a piece of silk mousseline. That's a bridal lady put me onto it. And it's kind of like holding a cloud. It's just, yeah. So this one is either the whole piece is a scarf, or you can get it as yardage and use it for sky. Did you? very, it's surprisingly warm. So, if anybody is just dying from the air conditioning, silk, even this fine, is warm.
Pass it around.
One thing that we talked about in the class the other week, or back in the other month in Lancaster, was mercerized fabric. And if you've ever worked with DMC floss, you see that the little label says mercerized. And this is a wide back. I'm not going to bother to unwrap it, but
What does mercerized mean?
Mercerized was invented by a guy by the name of Mercer, and it's a chemical treatment. I think they use a caustic soda to geek warning, but you can just tune out. I don't care. This high pH caustic product actually kind of plumps the fibers, and they swell up and they actually reflect more light. They're physically changed, but it's not like a chemical treatment or something. And so this is a wide back from Kaufman, and they call it Kona Premium Muslin. It is not the same fabric as the Kona in what's now 360. They call this Kona Premium Muslin, but it's not mercerized. I'm pretty sure the regular Kona is, but I did an experiment because dye geek. This is light Pimatex. These two fabrics were dyed in the same dye bath at the same time with the same dyes, mercerized, unmercerized.
Wow.
It was just an awesome example. Is that picking that up, or should I hold it up?
Those are all the suffragettes' colors.
Are they?
Green, yellow, purple.
And then there was some blue in there that gave us the green. And so the color saturation, the fabric that you actually use really makes a difference. Like that linen and rayon that's going around. It's not the same dye lot, but it's similar. You can see the colors are just not so intense. They're nice and dark, but they don't have the same kind of glow. I can get a 15-yard bolt. I buy a 100-yard roll, but I can roll 15 yards off, which shrinks down to like 13 7/8. Get that in one container and dye it all at the same time. So I could actually, instead of doing all hangers, I could start doing bolts. But this lets people open everything up. And, okay, I want this end, not that end. No, I don't have it in the middle. So that's another foray.
How do you get the texture on there? What do you do to it?
You just take your fabric and you just
And do you tie it then, or rubber band it, or you
Not
just
with
dump
that.
it in?
Just dump it in. But I've also done some snow dyeing, which people do ice dyeing, and some people use powdered dyes and sprinkle it on the ice, and they get some amazing patterning. But I'm already exposed to enough dye powder. That's really the only time it's they're in their powder form is really the time when they can be hazardous, and no one has tested them for eating. Why would you want to eat this? Oh, sorry, that's just nuts. So, Lord only knows, but you need to wear breathing protection. And most people, as little as they mess with dyes, can just wear a nice paper mask. I always say, get the one with the nose clip and the 2 straps. And it's a nuisance dust. People can get allergic to the dust. And that's why I don't clean my house. So that said, when I snow dye, I use snow when the Lord provides, and I do it in my basement. And So I'm not going to be messing around and do it with powdered dyes. So I use liquid concentrates and I pour them on the snow. You start with a screen, you put your fabric on the screen, you put the snow on the fabric, and then you put the dye on the snow. It trickles down and it splits, kind of like the way the dye on the elephant split. And yeah, it looks like a snow cone. Can't eat it. But depending on if you just go to your fabric and scrumple it up, or if you fold it, you get different patterns. So that, you can get some really good water lily or hydrangea fabric by just doing the scrumply stuff. So this was folded lengthwise. Sometimes I get like nut crazed and I actually iron my folds. So it was folded lengthwise, and then it was folded into a 60-degree, that's a 45, folded into a hexy triangle, the 60-degree triangle. And that's what gave the patterning. Thanks, Rachel. And I have 4 racks of fabric.
Oh.
So yeah, I had to limit myself. I don't like that. But yeah, that's how I take it to shows. So this is the same general idea of folding and snow dyeing. But this is a snow dye piece that was just scrumpled up. So I can do 4 yards at a pop. And again, I'm doing this thing with gold and purple. I keep coming back to them. And the visual texture is actually, even though it's the same kind of manipulation, it looks more like flames. It's not as hard-edged as this fabric, which, crashed. Similar colorway, much darker, obviously. It's hard to get really, really, really dark with snow dye. But there's more of the crystalline kind of crackle look with just dye and no snow than there is when you add the snow. So you do purples in this, and hydrangea city. But so I have a virtual chip chart, and I'm actually dyeing like arrays of 1 or 2 dozen colors in from 1 to 9 values.
So they can order that
They-
from your website.
Right, and what she said. Sometimes articulate and I don't get along. So actually doing like group orders to make the most. I can dye 18 yards of solid color at one shot in the wringer washer. And so I usually use a juice jar. It's like 2 quarts. Some colors I have to get the gallon jug out to make enough dye concentrate to dye 12 yards was last time, times 5 colors, and then, it's nuts, but there's a different kind of dye. It's called wash fast, because that's always good. Acid dye, because silk likes acid.
And where do you buy those?
I buy just about only from Pro Chemical and Dye in Fall River. And ProChem is sort of the gritty industrial, and it was founded by a guy who worked for the chemical company that created the MX dyes. And their quality assurance testing is through the roof. They're also on the East Coast, so it costs less to get a chip here. But the main chemical company, they don't have the patent for it anymore, so it's being made mostly in Asia. And sometimes quality control is good and sometimes it's not so good. And ProChem has rejected up to 50% of the dye lots that are submitted to them to test before they buy. It's better to go with something that's more stringent, because if I am trying to match, this color is amber in my swatch book. If I want to match that again, I can get really, really close. And the better my materials are, the better likelihood I have to do that.
Yes.
What's the
Art.
difference? The different use between a powder dye and a liquid dye. Is there?
Well, all my dyes, I start out as powders and I mix
Okay.
them into water to use
So
them.
that's how you buy it as
Right.
a powder.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
why I ship water. And
Oh,
also,
that's true.
yeah, they, depending on the dye, the way MX dyes work is they actually molecularly bond with the cellulose fiber or your skin. And it's looking for an oxygen molecule to bond with. And as somebody pointed out, well, what's the chemical formula for water? And the O? Oxygen. So you can have this jug of dye and it looks just as strong as anything, and you do all the steps and go through the whole thing and you pull your fabric out and it's pale. And it was supposed to be vibrant, because if the dye sits in the water and the warmer it is, the faster this reaction happens. The dye bonds with the oxygen in the water instead of the oxygen on your fabric. It looks perfectly full strength, but it's just not usable anymore.
So you don't mix it up till you're absolutely ready to do it?
It's good for about a week.
Oh,
My
okay.
studio is on the 3rd floor this time of year. A week is as long as I'm going to give it. It'll still dye, but the colors get lighter and lighter. So the warp was silk, to get back to the original question, and left is cotton. And it's that makes this technically a warp-faced sateen. And a sateen is like over 5 under 1. So they do it so that there's a little silk on the back side and a little cotton on the front side, but it's not enough to see. And I was just like, wow.